Shalom everybody, Moadim le Simcha, or actually what's left of Sukkot, which ends tonight in Israel. I know in the diaspora you have another day. I am Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, where you guys join me every Monday to Thursday to take a look at those top stories making headlines in Israel, the ones you don't see in the mainstream media in your countries. And as always, the Israel Brief is brought to you by our partners, Lay of the Land. And a reminder, because it is Chag, because it is a Jewish holiday, there won't be an Israel Brief tomorrow, so we will return to normal on Monday. It is day 383. Every day I wake up and I can't believe, and my heart sinks that it has been 383 days, not just of war, but of our hostages, the remaining 101 hostages being held by Hamas now for 383 days. We want them all back. We want them all back now. Before we head into Sukkot, let's take a look at the top stories making headlines and, of course, answer the section of the show that you guys love, and that is the audience question. So we begin with the news that the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who arrived in Israel yesterday for meetings, has departed. He left earlier this morning, just shortly before long-range missiles were fired by Hezbollah towards the center of the country and Tel Aviv. They were aiming for the Mossad headquarters in Glilot, which is just north of Tel Aviv. While he was here, the Secretary of State met with President Herzog, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Galant, as well as hostage families. And the Prime Minister described the meeting with the Secretary of State as friendly and productive. And the Secretary of State is reported to have told him to turn the military successes into strategic results and cautioned against escalations with Hezbollah and Iran. However, the Prime Minister did say to him that attempts on his life that happened over the weekend cannot go unanswered. In his meetings with Defense Minister Galant, the Secretary of State spoke about the importance of humanitarian aid continuing to enter the Gaza Strip. As we know, the U.S. expressed grave concern that there was a lull in humanitarian aid last month. And just a reminder that the IDF is bound by the Geneva Convention not to impede aid, but is under no obligation to provide aid or to distribute that aid. The Secretary of State also met with President Herzog, who said that he is a great friend to Israel and thanked him for the air defense system that America has sent to Israel, which is now firmly in place. When he met with the Defense Minister Galant also stressed that it is very important for the U.S. to stand with Israel against Iran. Now, what is very interesting is that the Secretary of State was scheduled to fly from Israel to Jordan, but has postponed his meetings in Jordan, speaking to the foreign minister over the phone, and instead will fly to Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, where he is expected to discuss possible normalization with Israel. So a very, very positive move indeed, and we will watch the space very carefully. In more news, it has been confirmed by the IDF that Nasrallah's replacement, Hashem Safieddine, has also been eliminated. The IDF spokesperson, Rear Admiral Hagari, confirmed that Safieddine was eliminated in an IDF strike on a Hezbollah stronghold in the southern Beirut suburb of the Dahia. The Dahia region is where Hezbollah have firmly set up shop, and as you can see by the attacks by the Israel Defense Forces and Israeli Air Force on that region, that is where the bulk of the targeted strikes are being carried out. He was a cousin of Hassan Nasrallah, who the IDF eliminated last month, and was killed along with 25 other Hezbollah terrorists. And yesterday, the head of Israel's Northern Command, Brigadier General Ori Golden, said that he believes that the IDF have eliminated at least 70% of Hezbollah's rocket capability. However, they are still able to fire not just on our soldiers, but on Israeli civilian centers as well. In a very interesting interview on Israel's Channel 12, Corporal Shai Gilboa, she serves as a medic in the Israel Defense Forces, gave testimony that Hamas is shooting at Palestinian civilians as they attempt to evacuate from areas that they have been told by the IDF to move away from, because there will be strikes, there will be intense clashes, and move to the safer humanitarian zones. In an interview, Corporal Gilboa said that Hamas gunmen were firing at Palestinians, wounding them, and that the wounded Palestinians were coming to the IDF Medics for help. And she said that the famous picture that's circulating on social media of her treating a Palestinian woman is a result of being shot and injured by Hamas. They want to continue to use their civilians as human shields so that they can rake up those civilian casualty numbers, so that many around the world put the blame firmly on Israel for killing Palestinian civilians. She went on to say they smile at us, they wave at us, they are not afraid of us. And said, however, language is a barrier. So once we've treated them, we send them towards the local medical force that are able to communicate with them and treat them even further. She went on to say that thousands of Palestinian civilians have adhered to the IDF's call for them to evacuate to safer areas. And finally, once Sukkot finishes, and I know in the diaspora you mark Shmini Atzeret, which we don't in Israel, Simchat Torah will start. Simchat Torah for us this year is extremely painful because it is the Hebrew calendar date that coincides with the 7th of October last year, which saw that horrific massacre, that pogrom carried out by Hamas, where over 1,200 people were murdered, mutilated, raped, families burnt alive, and over 251 taken hostage inside the Gaza Strip. And for a lot of Israelis and for a lot of Jews around the world, how do we celebrate this beautiful day in the Jewish calendar, the day that we complete a Torah cycle and we start another one, and we celebrate receiving the Torah, the very foundation that Judaism is based on? However, we remember that it is a day of extreme tragedy for the Jewish people. It is a day that has seen the biggest elimination or murder of Jews since the Holocaust. How do we balance these feelings of joy and these feelings of sorrow? Well, as Simchat Torah finishes on Saturday night, a day of mourning will start in Israel. We will mark a day of mourning to coincide with the Hebrew calendar date of the 7th of October, and that will carry on through to Sunday, where there will be ceremonies across the country allowing Israelis to take time out of their day to mourn our losses. So as it is written very, very famously, that to everything there is a season, a time to mourn and a time to celebrate, a time for war and a time for peace. And I think that this weekend absolutely exemplifies this, as we take that time to celebrate our heritage, to celebrate the Torah, to make sure that Hamas and their terrorist cohorts and those around the world who hate the Jewish people would want to rob us of that. We will take the time to celebrate that, and then we will take the time to mourn our dead and mourn our losses. And with that, I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom, Moadim LeSimcha, the rest of Sukkot, and Chag Simchat Torah Sameach. It is a day worth celebrating. So now let's take a look at today's audience question, and it comes from Birgit, who says, why has the Red Cross not done anything to help our hostages? She says, why are we continuing to send aid into Gaza, and do we know or don't we know how many hostages are still alive? Well, such important questions, Birgit. So let's answer that in increments. First of all, let's take a look at the Red Cross. And the Red Cross have been absolutely diabolical. We know from the early days of the war that they refused to hand over medications, many of them life-saving, to our hostages. In fact, the head of the Red Cross could barely even touch the bags that the Prime Minister handed over. They claim that they don't have access to Hamas and therefore cannot go and see the hostages. They don't know where they are. But they're in Gaza. They're handing out aid. Ergo, they have contact with Hamas. They are not doing anything to put on the pressure to demand that the hostages are released and that they have access to the hostages, at least those that are still alive, to ensure that they are receiving aid. They have handed no medication over to Hamas to give to hostages who desperately need it. And if you recall, last year, November, when there were hostages released and the Red Cross acted as a glorified taxi service, they allowed Palestinian prisoners who were released, prisoners with blood on their hands, to fly Hamas flags on their vehicles, which are meant to be neutral. So the Red Cross has acted much like they did during the Holocaust by turning a blind eye to the plight, not just of Jews, but to all of our hostages. The second part is Israel, as I said earlier, is not bound by the Geneva Convention to supply aid. However, we cannot impede it. But part of our morals, part of our ethics is we don't want to see Palestinians suffer. We don't want to see civilians suffer. And we'll make sure, as we have said on numerous occasions, that we will flood the Gaza Strip with as much humanitarian aid as possible. I know for many that this is a hard pill to swallow, but this is part of our ethos, this is part of our morals, and it is something that we are proud to uphold. With regards to how many hostages are still alive, we don't know for definite, but we estimate more than 50. More than that, we don't know. But we do know that there are still 101 hostages, including the remains of Hadar Golden and Oron Shaul, and civilians Hashem Al-Sayed and Avera Mengistu, who were taken captive 10 years ago. We want all of them, including the remains, released now. So with that, I am going to wish you a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom again. And remind you to take a look at our website at www.layoftheland.online, our Facebook page at Luttel's site, our YouTube channel right here at the Israel Brief. We're on Instagram at my page, Rolene_Marks, on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks, and on the Lay of the Land X page at Lay of the Land Farm. Guys, God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I will miss you until Monday. And take care of yourselves and take care of each other. God bless. Bye for now.